И даже в напитках есть разделение.
Начинаем?
Поехали.
Сергей Викторович, добрый день.
Mr. Lavrov, good afternoon. Let's not shake hands. Let's not kiss each other on the cheek. Let's keep distance. It's the coronavirus pandemic time. Not wearing masks, maybe, but still. We were warned that we don't have enough time for a proper interview because you are to meet with the Italians. So we will be probably interrupting you in order to keep it brief, okay? So when preparing to this interview, we said each other, half jokingly, that before Mr. Lavrov comes in, we should check whether a war started somewhere, because this year everything is happening fast, without any warning. Luckily, we have no war, no new war, but there is one which is still ongoing. It continues. We've seen that you applied every effort, you did everything. It was a marathon of 11 hours, and you probably didn't have a smoke for all these 11 hours, which I cannot imagine. And you reached a ceasefire with the two sides. But there is no ceasefire on the ground, unfortunately. So I want to ask you, is it at all possible to have a ceasefire? We, Russia, say that there is no alternative to a peaceful solution. But is it at all possible to solve it through political means? Will they stop? First and foremost, I want to tell you that these were unique negotiations. And at a crucial moment, the President contributed a lot because he was keeping his hand on the pulse late at night when we were burning midnight oil already. He called us. Was he there in person? No, he called us. It was a televised conference, and Sergei Shoigu joined too, because it was important to coordinate the fact that the ceasefire should be announced and coupled with the verification mechanism to control and monitor whether it's being kept. And over the last days, I several times contacted my counterparts in Baku and Yerevan. Sergei Shoigu did the same. He talked to the ministers of defense and president, having talking back and forth with the leaders of the two warring parties. And our signal here is simple. We need to organize meetings between the military so that they would be setting up a mechanism for verification of the ceasefire. No one is talking about that right now, unfortunately. Half an hour ago, I sent this very signal again when I was talking to the foreign minister of Azerbaijan. I'm sending the very same signal to our Armenian colleagues. I think this is key right now. We need a lasting ceasefire because it is the civilian infrastructure and the civilians who are suffering the most. What is that mechanism? What a silver bullet is it? Well, when politicians and diplomats say that they agree to cease all hostilities, the military should come in immediately and, in a follow-up manner, coordinate the concrete measures to be taken on the ground to keep the ceasefire in place. They decide who will be monitoring the ceasefire, who will be implementing the ceasefire. It's not a silver bullet, perhaps. No magic involved. It was just like that in the Donbass, in the Transnistria region. And as we know, in Donbass, there were a number of ceasefire. Luckily, over the last couple of weeks, it has been holding, but only thanks to the fact that the contact group has agreed on additional verification mechanisms. And same happened in 1994 in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. After the ceasefire was announced, the military followed up, deciding how to make it happen on the ground. And answering the second part of your question, I want to say yes, the political settlement is possible, and the proposals which are being worked out by the co-chairman, they are on the table. Sides know about the contents, so the parts of the territory should be freed one by one, and Nagorno-Karabakh should be guaranteed security, and until the status is agreed upon, there should be ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This scheme is well known to all the involved parties. Fortunately, these recent events, well, they happen, but I hope that they will push forward the political process and will help us to improve security situation on the ground. You mean these two regions with Armenia, Luchinsky and another one? So they should be freed? Let me tell you this. All the arrangements which we have been discussing with the sides of this conflict. So first 5 regions should be freed, then 2 more, that will be stage 2. And also stage 2 would involve the final resolution of the status of Karabakh. And besides these 2 regions, all communication lines, all economic ties should be again free and open. Peacekeeping mission could come to the region to prevent any more hostilities from happening. So it's all about peacekeeping, right? Peacekeepers will come. This mechanism, it should start working on the line of contact. That's what we believe in. These are the regions which should be freed, as the co-chairman believe. We need at least observers to be in place, if not peacekeepers. That would be the right thing to do, to send observers, and our military can be that part of the observation mission. They can form that mission for the initial time, and I hope that the leadership of Yerevan and Baku will take heed of our proposal. We have good relations with both countries. Mr. Lavrov, let's call a spade a spade. This war in Nagorno-Karabakh, it was inspired by Turkey. And Turkey oftentimes becomes our, well, far from ally. Let me tell you this. It's more of a trouble sometimes in Syria and other places. And we say all the time that Turkey is our strategic ally. So let me ask you this. How is it going to be with Turkey now after this situation? Who are we to each other, Russia and Turkey? We never said that Turkey our strategic ally. It's our partner, a very good partner, and on some of the tracks of our cooperation, this is indeed strategic cooperation partnership. We work together in Syria. We are working on the Libyan crisis. At the same time, we see that Turkey is pushing its own interests in the region. And if its interests are legitimate, if these are Turkey's or Iran's or Saudi Arabia's or Qatar's legitimate interests, they have their full right to pursue their interests, as long as they are legitimate, as I said. But this whole process, it should be transparent. When it comes to Syria, I think we have this transparency, legitimacy in place, indeed. It's true that Turkey's military are on the territory of Syria without being invited by the legitimate authorities of Syria, but Assad, Bashar al-Assad, he agreed on the Astana format and its arrangements. So we see cooperation. The Astana trio of guarantors, Russia, Turkey and Iran, have already reached a number of important agreements, and I believe that this cooperation is key here. It is this cooperation that has helped us to reduce the territories which terrorists control to a very small fraction of territory in the Idlib province. To the east of Euphrates, the situation is way more complicated. We see that there is a lot of separatism there. The Kurdish population is being inspired to be building different rules of the game. The territories to the east of Euphrates are governed in a very different way. They are not controlled by the legitimate authorities of the country. As for Libya, we do work together with Turkey. Our military, our diplomats have met many times, as well as the intelligence are communicating. We did that because we want to be in contact with all the stakeholders. We're working together with the East, with the West, the parliament and the national court government. Turkey, as you know, they support the national court government, but Turkey at the same time understands that we should be pursuing compromise in order to reach common ground with all the parties involved. Right now, the situation in Libya is quite chaotic, but we see that the situation is improving. The parties are reaching at least some understanding, some common understanding. We have Morocco, Egypt, Tunis, they are neighboring countries, and they are playing an increasing role in this process, and we support them wholeheartedly. Right now, we need to channel this work through the UN to make it a one-stop shop, let me put it like that. We need to stimulate the warring sides in Libya so that they would step away from ultimatums, as they used to be doing, relying mostly on ultimatums. Instead, they should sit at the negotiating table and try to reach accord. The United Nations, our colleagues in the UN, are trying to help the sides to find common denominator, and I've heard that Turkey also takes quite a lot of interest in seeing that this process succeeds. Diplomacy is about taking into account the interests of all sides inside a conflict, inside a country which is gripped by the conflict, but also the interests of regional stakeholders. If these interests are legitimate, and if these interests are, well, appreciated by the conflicting sides. Let me interrupt you. You said that interests of all should be taken into account. What about Nagorno-Karabakh? Should we say that Turkey's interest in Nagorno-Karabakh is legitimate? I'll tell you this. We do not think that Turkey's interests in Nagorno-Karabakh are legitimate because, well, as Mr. Aliyev said, there is a military solution to the conflict, and we don't believe in that. Well, Turkey says that it's exactly the case, and Turkey said that it's going to support any action on the part of Azerbaijan in order to put an end to this conflict, including military intervention. We are keeping contact with our Turkish colleagues. I communicated several times with the Foreign Minister of Turkey, Mr. Çavuşoğlu, and we stand firmly that there is only peaceful solution to this conflict. It's the only way to ensure lasting peace and lasting solution to this conflict, because all other things, all other options, they will lead to this conflict being put on ice, and that's it. Sooner or later, we need to make peace happen, because any military solution will not be a good one in the long run. It will be just a war which would be postponed. Yes, just as in Palestine today. Okay, let me ask you something again. Probably we all know that Erdogan is now way more active politically and geopolitically than he used to be. We have Middle East, Libya, Syria, and he believes that it's his backyard in a way, the zone of his interests, and he's saying that openly. As for Cyprus, he plays a game of his own. He's trying to push away Greece. They were just one step away from war. Jerusalem, he said, is an Ottoman city. That's what he said. And look at South Caucasus. He's very actively involved here. In his inauguration speech, he talked about Turkey, and he said, Ottoman Turkey. That's what he said. And in Turkey, he's been said to be the new Sultan. He wants to create a new Ottoman Empire. That is why he's so active geopolitically. Not to mention the Sophia Cathedral. He decided to turn it into a serving mosque again. So will we be reviewing our policies towards Turkey in the light of all that? Well, you always should be up to date with your policies. As for Turkey, here we should be taking into account the facts, the reality of the situation. Any kind of policy that we uphold, we should be striving for peace, not for war, because war is not an extension of politics. When there is aggression against you, you should still try to be listening to politics. We say it, if they don't want to listen to Lavrov, they will be listening to Shoigu instead. Okay, I know this joke, yeah. Still, first of all, I'd like to outline something for you. I'll give you a couple of broad strokes about the situation. We said that Turkey is increasingly active in the international arena today. But sometimes there are other countries who are even more active, and these countries, they're thousands of kilometers away. There are countries which are closer, but still, the United States is involved in every situation. It plays a very substantial role. In Syria, the United States is undermining the whole UN process of peace. I mean, the resolutions which have been adopted by the United Nations. Now the US is trying to install a quasi-state in a part of Syria. Its forces are there on the ground. Now, all the countries in the world have been prohibited by the United States to buy oil from Syria, while at the same time, American companies are allowed to be pumping oil in Syria. And again, the US says that these parts of these territories in Syria should not be in any way answering to the authorities, legitimate authorities of Syria. The Kurdish terrorism is another problem. And I believe that there are some certain concerns on the part of Turkey towards security on its borders. And these interests are quite legitimate. At least they're way more legitimate than what the America's leadership is doing in Syria. In Libya, America is also very active, very involved. America is trying to pursue its own goals in this conflict, trying to undermine Turkey and undermine Russia at the same time. That's what the US openly says. It's about oil as well.
To leave the moratorium that was announced, it has large political significance because it affects the prices on energy supplies. But the political problem in Jerusalem and settlement of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, establishment of the Palestinian state. So the United States, they pushed everyone away. They said, we will deal with it ourselves. There was this Arab Peace Initiative, first Palestinian state, then the normalization of the relations of Israel with all the Arabs, but they decided to put it head over heels over head. So because first they normalized the situation, the relations with the Arab neighbors, and then we see if the Palestinian issue needs to be resolved. We all for improving the relations between Israel and other countries in the region, but we are against of doing that at the expense of the interests of the Palestinian people that are enshrined in the resolution of the General Assembly that states the establishment of the Israeli state, because Israeli state does exist and they are our close friends and partners. And there is no Palestinian state yet, of course. We have to wait for something that has been promised for 3 years, as the proverb goes. But it has been more than 3 years. And, of course, the situation when it is stated that about the Security Council decision about the state of the Jerusalem situation must be resolved with taking all the interests in mind, because it's the capital of three world global religions. And when Alexa, those actions that must be enshrined in the agreement regarding the final solution in the context of the establishment of the Palestinian state is revised again, I guess For the leaders of the Muslim world, and Erdogan is one of such leaders, we will hear such statements. And in principle, in the wider context of the situation in the Muslim world, there is an obvious struggle for the leadership. There are several followers. Turkey and Saudi Arabia, they want to be leaders of the Muslim world. Saudi Arabia, like I said, is one of the leaders, and they have the greatest holy sites of the Islam in their country, in their territory, and apart from Arabs and Turks, there are Pakistani and Indonesians, which is one of the largest Muslim state in the world. And we have relations with the Arab League, with the Council of Cooperation of Arab Countries and the Persian Gulf, with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that unites all Arab states with no exception in Asia, in Africa, wherever they are located. And unfortunately, inside Islam, this confrontation, this competition to be a leader, it takes quite often, and recently it's becoming more and more often, it's taking quite violent shapes. And we stay in contact with our counterparts from the Arab organizations, and we encourage them to find some mutual solutions, mutually beneficial solutions and consensus, so that they strive for a harmony between all the confessions in Islam. I guess in 2010, the King Abdullah of Jordan, he held a summit of all the Muslims where a number of documents were adopted. Amman Declaration, if I got the name of this document right, and it enshrined the confirmation of the unity of all the Muslim and obligation to promote this unity in all kinds of practical situations. But so far, it hasn't worked out. As for Sofia Haji, yes, we admit that Turkey has a right, the Istanbul authorities have a right to use this site in whichever way they want, but still, it's a global heritage site, and the status was given it by UNESCO. And the discussion is not over yet in UNESCO. We were assured by our Turkey counterparts that everything related to the Orthodox culture will remain open for the visitors, for tourists, for pilgrims. So we'll see how it's going to be implemented in practice on the ground, because it's not over yet. And as for South Caucasus, just take a look at who's being active in South Caucasus. Americans are active as well. But Americans are saying that the whole world is in their national interest. But Turkey has never seen that never said that they are empire, and now they are getting there. But we are comparing them like a bull and Jupiter, or what is going on? No, we just want to make clear. So does everyone have to be Jupiters or bulls? What's the deal with that? Another question. I will quote yourself now. If in the EU they don't understand the necessity of the mutually respectable dialogue with them, we'll stop talking to them. What did you mean? That's not what I said. I said that when we have a question, then, not just if we can continue business as usual with them. We then ask if it's possible to have any dealings with them at all, if they are being so condescending, so arrogant. While talking to Russia, they demand us making reports about our alleged sins that we allegedly committed. We think we don't have to report about anything, because first of all, we have our own constitution, we have our own legislation, we have mechanism. This, your famous quote when you were asked to change the constitution, you told him not to. Told him off, not to lecture you. If I'm allowed, let me continue. How can we stop dialogue with them? Well, first of all, there are economic interests, and we must preserve them. And economic operators, it's up to them what's beneficial to them and what's not. But to tiptoe around them and to be humiliated by them. I think it's an undignified solution. If they are going to destroy our partnership, including the Nord Stream 2, then I guess entire gas pipeline infrastructure, entire network, the entire cooperation among the departments, it's impossible to destroy this. So let things go the way they go, from objective interests that will coincide. But when we are told that we are not mature enough, we are not old enough, we are not big enough to be a geopolitical partner, as they stated recently when Heiko Maas, the foreign minister of Germany, is saying that our contradictions with Russia do not mean that us, Germany, we don't want to have good relations or at least sensible relations with Russia. But I don't think it is going to be good in the near future, even though it's not our fault, and we always ready to normalize this relation at equal ground. As for sensible relations, everything about sense, so it's beside the dialogue that we have, and hopefully they will find the common sense there. And speaking about some underflows or water flows, about the new approach on behalf of the European Union towards Russia, Germany recently publicly, the people, the think tanks and political scientists that are close to the government, they started to develop new policies, and it suggests to destroy the current bilateral agenda. And their approach states that we had a strategic partnership, now it's a matter of the past. We had the partnership to upgrade things that was promoted by Frank-Walter Steinmeier, but these political scientists think that it wasn't implemented, couldn't implement them, so Russia refused to think along the lines of NATO and the European Union, and now we are opponents regarding a lot of principal issues. So now these are thinkers that are close to the German government, and they suggest, the way they put it, they say that we need to refuse to have any strategic plans regarding Russia, and more than that, if until recently the European Union were saying that yes, strategically wise, we have contradictions with Russia, but we have mutual interests. So these thinkers regarding these new approaches, they state that there is this paradigm that even selective partnership, selective cooperation could only be possible when Russians will change their ways. So, and it's growing, these sentiments are growing there when political analysts of this kind, such things are being voiced or being spoken about. It goes to tell about the changes in the attitudes of the authorities of the ruling elite, and we will see how is it going to be in the practical policies. But so far, such countries as France and Germany, so I can be very optimistic regarding relations with them, even though in Paris they seem to be or want to keep strategic partnership with us. At least that's the position that President Macron expressed in the context of his agreements with President Putin. So it is being implemented in a number of mechanisms that were created between Moscow and Paris so that we could discuss and work out some mutual common approaches, common visions regarding strategic issues, regarding strategic safety issues, strategic stability issues in Europe. So we'll see where it goes, where this whole situation goes, all these thinking processes. But once again, I will reiterate myself, recent meeting of the foreign ministers yesterday, Dr. Josep Borrell, and I think that being a man with experience, he understands perfectly that without Russia, it's going to be very difficult to resolve a lot of things that the EU is interested in. Even this instinct, self-preserving instinct, should encourage Europe, the United Europe, the European Union, to stay partners with Russia, to cooperate with Russia. But from the way I see it, and judging from his reaction to a number of my questions, the EU can't really do anything with the Russophobic minority that are speculating on the principles of solidarity. So this Russophobic minority, they are blocking and attempts to have a constructive approach to develop relations with Russia. Russophobic minority, what we're talking about, Baltic countries, Poland, we are running out of time. I know that Vladimir from Komsomolskaya Pravda, they want to ask, but you are asking such major questions that it's really hard. So yes, I know you want me to be laconic. But we can change our behavior different ways. Why don't we talk about that Merkel is meeting Navalny, a lot of Western leaders are meeting Tikhanovskaya, and we are staying cautious, we are being defensive. Maybe you should start meeting their opposition leaders as well, at least at the level of the foreign ministry. You could meet with our sympathizers in these countries. We are being so cautious at the background of everything is just being blown apart. But we were trying to stay decent, and we have always respected the decisions that were made in the countries that we have relations with, the decisions in regard with the election of leaders, parliament leaders, parliament members, and so on and so forth. And yes, we see how our Western colleagues always meet with opposition representatives. And a number of years ago, we have discussed this matter, and we have made a decision that we will work with the opposition. Before that, we haven't really strayed away from talking to opposition, but now we will do that without looking back at those who wanted to make any demands in us. So let's look at the presidential campaign in France, and our MPs invited Marine Le Pen, here, leader of the political party, a legitimate politician. She's talking with MPs, and Putin talks to her. And my counterpart, the foreign minister of France, openly states that they see it as an interference into the inner political matters of France. So France doesn't want to interfere with our political matters, and they hope that Russia wouldn't do that. But now look at what is going on, who Macron is meeting, Merkel is meeting, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, how is she received? And no one even paying attention to the fact that that's interference into the internal Belarusian matters. Maybe since we are so cautious, so polite, we have no obstacles in talking to the opposition at the moment. And, well, if these are not the opposition that want to overthrow the constitutional government in our partnering countries, we can talk to anyone, and that's what's happening in a number of occasions. And as for the start of the question, Navalny, about the criminal case that we were supposed to start, because that's their argument that we haven't started the criminal case. We have explained it on a number of occasions. The criminal case can only be launched based on the fact that will allow us to suspect the criminal of the crime. And before such decision about launching criminal investigation, there should be an actual investigation, case investigation. That is now underway by our Ministry of Internal Affairs. So they were taking some witness statements from the doctors, from the hotel staff, from the plane crew, and so on and so forth. And I'm not even going to list you, because on various TV networks, you can hear so many facts about a lot of things being unsaid and about this battle and why people came running to this battle suite, why were they wearing only their underwear and no one else got sick. So there are millions of things like that, and we are going to insist that our German counterparts respected their international obligations based on the Convention of the legal help and its protocols. And as for the criminal persecution, and as for who needs to explain what, quite recently we heard the phrase from the officials that we have data that CIA works with Navalny, so that was publicly stated. And right away, person with this Italian name, Navalny's lawyer, demanded to prove this information that was spread. And that's their position. And when we ask to prove the existence of any crime and what happened with Navalny, when Germans are asking when we ask Germans to ask what was found in his desk, we are told, don't you believe us? And then they tell us we can't hand it over to you because the patient should give his consent and he doesn't. Well, that's a classical way of their policy. So all the animals are equal, but some animals are more equal. And then the follow-up question, you mentioned Germany and the Nord Stream, so allow me to follow up on this question. So what are we going to do if Germany rejects the Nord Stream? And wider question, bigger question that I've been wanting to ask for a long time now. Whatever we do, we get sanctions. And there is an opinion that it doesn't depend on what we do. It doesn't depend on our behavior, that there is a number of sanctions that have been devised a number of years ago, and it will be applied not to change our behavior, but to curb our development, economical, trade development, military development. There would be a Magnitsky case or something else to introduce sanctions. So look at how many people die in American jails. We do not introduce any sanctions, and we can't introduce any sensitive sanctions. So that was something that we would feel. But if they still do that, maybe we shouldn't even notice them. Maybe we should defend our interests in a wider way. So maybe we should just make up our minds. What do we want to do with this integration? Do we want to go back to some kind of a union state? Maybe we should be more aggressive in a good sense of this word to position ourselves this way if there are still sanctions.
Well, I said it long ago. We need to stop defining ourselves in terms of the words that the West uses to describe us. I think we are a state with its own constitution, a sovereign state with a government, and the people of Russia, they should decide whom they trust to lead this country. Point blank. Most of our partners, they are ready to work on the basis of respect towards each other, seeking the balance of interests. While with them, we need to continue our cooperation, and luckily, that's the majority of our partners who are like that. With many of them, we have initiated a better dialogue in order to reinforce our political ties. For example, the CSTO, we have the Commonwealth of Independent States, which is basically the post-Soviet republics joining together in one bloc. And we have the Eurasian Economic Union, the allied state of Russia and Belarus. These are the formats we should be working on, and we should step up our work on these tracks. The president has already proposed to us that we work harder on all these issues, and we need to do all we can in order to make these formats more attractive for others who are are outside of these organizations just yet. Again, I'd like to confirm the following. I do not think which we should be always looking back at what the West is saying about us. We are indeed seeing that the West is trying to hinder our growth and development. Maybe we should be more, initiative, more active and involved. We can take our forces, send them to Donbass, for instance. No, we are very polite people, as you know, and I'm sure that our position, which is us being quite detached from a situation, when we do not really think about others, what they say, is a good one. But we always are within the boundaries of international law, and that is key. We always pursue only those means which are within the framework of international law. And when it comes to others who signed off on an agreement to settle a problem, a conflict, we should persuade them to actually follow up on their promises. I sent dozens of letters to my colleagues in France and Germany, saying it directly to them that they are acting absolutely in contradiction to the Minsk Accords. And that is something which the government of Ukraine does. Ukraine, at the official level, I mean, the president of the country and the government of the country are undermining the Minsk Accords. And the responses which I get from France and Germany, well, they all just a formality. They are saying something very hollow. They say, we need to be quite consistent in implementing the Minsk Accords. And they say, well, we do uphold the Minsk Accords. Yes, we do. I say to them, Ukraine is violating its own constitution and its foreign obligations, discriminating against the Russian language. They've introduced a couple of laws to outlaw Russian language at this level. And they say, yes, we are determined to turn this issue to the attention of the OSCE at the next meeting. So they believe they're above the law. They believe they are above the Russian Federation. They have this superiority thing in them. It's deep-rooted in them. Maybe we should have this superiority too. We are self-reliant. We are sure of ourselves, not overly sure. People are saying this more and more often, that we need to stop showing our concerns, showing that we are alarmed by the situation. We need to act. We need to push. Or maybe should be initiating some processes, not just react to others' actions. Maybe it's true time for us to step up this game. Belarus. We've just talked about Tikhanovskaya. She's been traveling across the world, meeting with presidents. She's in one of the neighboring countries, in a EU country right now. And the question I have, are we ready to see Belarus undergo a change of power? Do we have plan B? Or do we only believe in Lukashenko? Because oftentimes there happens a change of power due to a certain turn of events, a revolution or anything. And we are left without plan B at all, and we don't know what to do. Look, I think we should be very objective about the situation which we see on our borders. These are our neighboring countries, our allies, and for years, for hundreds of years, we've been living in one country. At the same time, we shouldn't be acting like the US does. I never agree with what the US does. It acts without reservation, it's aggressive, it's blunt. So we believe that every nation has the right to determine its own future. And America is imposing its own will on others through its embassies. You know what happened in Kiev, in Ukraine. There were two modern revolutions. And you know that there are lots of FBI and CIA representatives and operatives in the government of Ukraine. Same is true for Moldavia, and we can guess about that, judging by what the ambassador says there. Same happens in other former Soviet republics, which we know of. We shouldn't be acting like that. We should be different. We know better than that. We need to be aware of what our allies want to do, and we need to take steps which would help us to maintain mutually beneficial and respectful relations with our allies, irregardless of what turn the political situation in this or that country takes. And I believe that our position here, our approach towards the constitutional reform, which is being actively discussed in Belarus, it was his proposal. We believe that this is a good way forward. We state openly that this is a good opportunity for Belarus to start a pan-nation dialogue which would take on board all the political forces. I think that's the optimal solution to the existing situation. We said that we recognize the outcomes of the presidential election in Belarus, and we believe that any attempt to throw doubt over these results, and we know that there have been multiple attempts like that from the Western countries. Now the OEC is also involved. We believe that these are malign attempts. They are using malign means to pursue their own goals. Also, there was an invitation to observers to come and see how the elections were going. Now the OEC is saying that they can't do that. Well, the OEC basically missed its opportunity to contribute to the improvement of the situation. It had the opportunity and it missed the opportunity which it was given. Now some say that only the OEC can save us all and save the situation. I think it's incorrect to say that. If we want to help the people of Belarus, if we want to do that, and by the way, Lukashenko said that he's not clinging on to power, he is ready to go if the people decide so. So if we want the people of Belarus to be united and to prosper, we need to put an end to all these ultimatums. We need to prevent any violent process from happening. We are calling upon all stakeholders, all parties involved, including the law enforcement, to be, well, acting within the reasonable bounds. How can Russia stop these protests from happening? No, I mean we should stop all these calls for more rallies, for all those interruptions of transportation operation. We've heard a lot of calls like that, and we know that many are saying that there should be protests. Mr. Lavrov, so Belarus is almost on fire. Sorry to interrupt you, but I need to finish my answer. We do put forward initiatives. In 2014, the Minsk Accord, the Minsk Agreement, it was initiated by Russia and was supported by head of France, Germany, and Ukraine. And what some say today in Ukraine, that there is no way Ukraine can implement the obligation because Russia has a different interpretation of them. That's just plain wrong. There is only one way to interpret the Minsk agreements, and that is the international legal interpretation of them. It's all in black and white there. We want the people in Ukraine enjoy their rights in full. And now we see that the government in Ukraine is not ready to take into account the interests of the east of Ukraine. When you say that we need to be standing up for our interests, relying on international law, sometimes I want to ask, is there international law? But that's a rhetorical question, because oftentimes we journalists see that there is no international law. There is only what happens on the ground. And we see that Belarus is almost on fire. Now, Kyrgyzstan is experiencing a problem of its own. Well, we've talked about Nagorno-Karabakh already, and my colleagues from Sputnik, because we have Sputnik here, Moscow. Yes, I talked about Moldavia, so I know what I'm talking about. Yes, we have Sputnik in Moldavia, in Georgia, and our reporters say that they are preparing for something because they believe they are in for a rough ride. So, is it that we are fighting against some evil forces there, like America, or maybe the situation which is about to erupt is the result that someone is trying to create chaos on our borders, or maybe that's just, turmoil in all these countries, which only these countries alone to be blamed for. What should we do? Yes, that's true. These countries have enough turmoil happening, and that is part of the explanation, and I'm not going to dwell on it right now. In all the countries which you mentioned, they have problems of their own, in Kyrgyzstan and Moldavia. But you also mentioned that whatever we do, the West will always try to put us on our knees, to hinder our growth, to cut every way that we can pursue in order to grow politically or economically. And that's all part of the same puzzle. But that's something which they are doing today. They are hindering their own security growth. Well, you know the wording that they use. Maybe when you are in a polite society, you can say something like they do, but when it turns to political talks and dialogue, well, they are way below par in terms of what they say and how they do that. Well, I really enjoy our conversation because I can say it all openly. So they're trying to throw us off balance. They are doing that through direct verbal assault. They are resorting to sanctions and unfair competition. At the same time, they're throwing off balance the countries on our borders this way, trying to give us no opportunity to focus on positive growth. That's what they are doing. We're seeing that. That's a fact, a stated fact. Of course, there is always a temptation to say or to do something in reciprocity. I still believe that we need to be reliant on international law. You're old school. Yes, I'm old school. And I also think that the future holds nothing but international law and the United Nations being respected by all. So the moral high ground can be enjoyed by only someone who relies on international law, universal law, the law which was supported and approved of by everyone through joining the UN and the many international conventions which are there. The Minsk Accords have been recognized by the UN Security Council. It's now part of international law. The Nagorno-Karabakh settlement, we have the OSCE Minsk group with 3 core chairmen, and we are one of the most active members. You said that there are now attempts to bring someone else to this process, to this negotiating table. And I can tell you that we have adopted a document saying that the negotiating format will stay as it is. No one will be joining it. And again, that's something all the sides within the Minsk group agreed upon. Personally, sometimes you may want to be quite aggressive towards others. You want to say something rude to respond to their rudeness. However, you need to restrain yourself from any such temptation. Mr. Lavrov, just to sum it up, we need to reach agreement with others. And we need to do that not with Moldavia, but with the US. It's 1 month before the US will be holding election. Do you have any forecasts to share with us? Have you seen any signs that, well, the situation will be better, maybe it will be worse? We need to be pragmatic, and pragmatism is one of the pillars of our international policy, our global policy. So we need to advance cooperation with all parties which are ready to cooperate on equal terms, and we need to be talking with everyone with whom we have some points of connection. Even though the situation today is, well, beyond mending, I mean, the situation which we have with the US, I still believe that on some tracks we still have very good cooperation. Syria is one example. We do not agree with the US decision to come without invitation, and basically the US is occupying part of the territory. They are stealing its hydrocarbons, I mean serious hydrocarbons, selling it. They are fueling separatism in the country. At the same time, when it comes to the military-to-military connections, we have good, reliable channels of communication. They are flying over the country. We are doing the same. So we agreed on the zones which are cleared for our flights, and we agreed on a prevention mechanism. We have radio communications up and running all the time. In terms of our political connections, we have a very good mechanism in Afghanistan, which involves Russia, United States, and China. Iran can join too, and I think none of the parties have any disagreement over whether Iran can join or not. In terms of the Korean Peninsula, we also have kind of good cooperation. Sometimes our approaches are worlds apart, and yet we reach agreement. In terms of Nagorno-Karabakh, yes, we cooperate here too. And as for Transnistria, it's another opportunity for us to work together. We have a very good mechanism, 5+2 it's called, Russia, Ukraine, America, the OEC, and the EU. We're all on board here. Unfortunately, the Transnistria settlement is stalling. And, well, you know the reasons. Here, America is trying to be the one, tries to lead the pack and everything, creating another hard point out of Moldavia, so that the coalition, which formed a while ago, and I mean Ms. Sando and Mr. Dodon and his Socialist Party, America wants to undermine the coalition, and it wants the pro-Western forces to win this game.
But the United States is still the most powerful country. But these countries, they can't resolve unilaterally all the matters of the international agenda. They are still trying to do this. That's kind of inertia that is slowing down, and they are trying to do that, first of all, in the post-Soviet states, where they are trying to promote the anti-Russian agenda, where they try to establish beneficial processes, beneficial to them, about the further development of the states in Central Asia, in Ukraine, in Transcaucasus, and in Moldova. I know that they are also looking now at how they could start these processes, and Belarus as well. Yes, we must oppose to that, first of all, by fulfilling our obligations to our strategic allies. So we clearly stated that, the President clearly stated that, and also we have other ways of cooperation at the lawmaking level, at the civic society level, and I think at the level of the civic society we have to be more active, we have to take more initiative, and I'm talking about the funding matters as well, because even though they are called NGOs, everyone knows that the ones that are most active, most efficient, let's put it this way, most efficient NGOs in the West, American, Republican institutes, Democratic institutes, they are 100% financed by the American budget and by the Agency of International Development, which is also state institution. It's also funded by the budget. They have subsidies, hundreds, maybe even thousands of NGOs that they get their funding that are active in the post-Soviet territory. And I think that what we are talking about soft power is that we must learn how to use it as a practical means of the people diplomacy. But so far, of course, we are no match. And Margot has said it herself in one of the previous statements she made on the TV. We are also no match in the way, in the scale of support by the state that the media is getting in the West and that the media is getting in Russia. Yes, it's even ridiculous to compare it. But now we have this understanding that's the way we should go. Mr. Lavrov, so we are witnessing this paradox. So, well, that's all true, but at the same time, there is Komsomolskaya Pravda in the USA, but it's being banned in Belarus temporarily. You shouldn't have said that, because you will be banned in the US as well now, because they just forgot about you. But if Pompeo has just said that all the research labs in the US, they must inform where do they get grants, where do they get funding, and they openly say that has to be Chinese money, Russian money that damage the American state. Well, okay, maybe we could interfere in the internal affairs of the USA just right now in front of our audience. So who do we cheer for, Trump or Biden? We are now the people who are deciding the destinies of the future of the US. We are public enemy number one. We don't have to spend any money. Oh, wait. We have to give instructions to our staff. So who do we cheer for? Continue, cover objectively what is going on. That's boring. No, that's not boring. It's even interesting in this case. But no matter who wins, they will say that well, let them say that. Putin said that we are going to cooperate with whomever, with the president, with the administration that is supported, elected by the American people. That's our position, and I don't think we should change anything in this regard. And I agree with you that the losing party, the loser, will blame because both parties, Republican and Democratic, they use as one of the main principal arguments. They say that Russians want to take the other side to power. But we can be sure about one thing, that the situation with our relations, it is not going to change drastically. There could be some minor details one way or another. It won't become worse. Well, I don't know. We stay optimistic because pessimists are saying that it's not going to be worse, and optimists are saying it could get worse, as the joke goes. So, Mr. Lavrov, look, our diplomats are being sent away from Czech Republic, from Norway, from Slovakia, from Bulgaria. Why? What is going on? Why they start this strange race? And we are trying to respond with the same measures, but can we take a more drastic measure to reply, to respond to all this, to stop this epidemic? Well, this becoming a sign of a good behavior in front of the United States and the United Kingdom, by the way, because the UK, they are playing a very negative part traditionally and recently as well. If you remember the situation with the Skripals, when I think 60 our diplomats were sent away from the United States alone, and the UK was the vast majority of the EU members could send away Russian diplomats. So not a lot of them managed to withstand this pressure, but we have said on a number of occasions, and our partners who participated in this sending away campaign, they said that they had no facts from the UK, the same as now. Germans are not going to give any facts, despite all the legal obligations we have. Yes, so we respond in the same way. That's the diplomatic way to go, but that's a diplomatic response. But of course, we make our conclusions also in that regard, that these decisions alone about sending away Russian diplomats for accusing them in espionage or anything in spying or anything else. So that's not only diplomatic practice, that's not the only thing it reflects. It goes to show that they agreed to use these Russophobic sentiments and they want to shield Europe from the military equipment, from the Russian gas, and they want to replace it. America wants to replace it with more expensive commodities, but the countries that will agree to this deal, they will live calmly, so Americans won't bother them for some time. Then I'm sure they will start all this again. So that's why we are trying to reply in a symmetric way. So that's the concept that we are following. But then we make conclusions how reliable these partners. You remember this expression, if there will be a fight, then strike first. Let's do something then. So when they introduce more sanctions against us, I can't go into more details, but I think that's what we do recently on a number of occasions. One more question, a follow-up question. Mr. Lavrov, could you please say, Mr. Shekhnazarov, Karen Shekhnazarov has recently made a post, and then he ended this post with a question mark, and this post was about if Russia is an empire or not, because a lot of things depend on that. So you, as a foreign minister, how do you think, are we an empire? If we are, then there is a corresponding foreign policy. For Karen, it's a rhetoric question because he is convinced that Russia is an empire, and I respect his invested interest in analyzing what is going on. Not all the politicians succeed in that because they don't have enough time to do that, but his ideas, his thinking process about that only the empires have future in today's world, keeping in mind that smaller countries, they can't compete with larger countries. So he's talking about the Soviet Union being an empire as well as the Russian Empire from the past, and Russian interests in the international arena in preserving the influence and the support from the neighboring countries, and the European Union is also an empire in essence, and the United States are an empire with global China by promoting their projects of this one road, one belt, the Silk Road, of the Arctic path, about unified destiny of the humankind. They are also projecting their national interest, and they are interested in the influence that will have reached far from the Chinese border. Just to simplify things, Karen is using this term empire. I guess you could come up with a more precise term for the modern world that will nevertheless show that the process of the objective process of forming of the polycentric multipolar world, it implies an elevation and the dialogue not among the 193 countries of the UN, but among the larger countries, the permanent Security Council members. And I would remind you about the Putin's initiative that they have special responsibility according to the UN Charter. And of course, I'm talking about this newly created in decades larger alliances. The European Union is one of such examples as any other classical empire from the past. When it starts to expand, it starts to face problems. A number of countries in the EU, first of all, the Visegrad 4, they start seriously express their unhappiness with the red tape, with bureaucracy, because it multiplies itself, it strengthens its own influence, and in this case, it's damaging regions. Well, in case of the UA, it's damaging member states. And now, when the other countries are expanding their interests, it's going to face more and more problems, be it in Afghanistan, where they are trying to use all means possible to achieve something, and they won't achieve anything without the support from the other countries. In Iraq, one of the brightest examples, 2003, they reached Iraq, they announced that the state is now democratic, the country is gone, the state's gone. Libya was bombarded, shelled by NATO, by the US initiative, and France was one of the leaders. Obama decided to stay in the background. So that's true. So wherever they expand to, the US in the last couple of decades, so first of all, they didn't establish democracy anywhere, even though it was their main goal, and they didn't bring any calm there, because they are just destroying the state wherever they go. So coming back to this question, so this polarity that we are talking about, it has to be aimed at organization of cooperation, looking for common ground, looking for the balance of interest among the key centers of the modern world that have territories, and population, and economical and technological possibilities and capacities, and civil sector and military sector, and Security Council permanent members, the 5 Security Council members. It's clear that France and the UK are part of Europe, so the UK is going to be a country that is divided by the channel from Europe, but we can't ignore the European Union. Let's talk about another empire. So what is going to happen with Japan now? I don't think that you can define Japan as an empire. Well, I'm talking about it with irony. They have an emperor. Technically, they are an empire. Well, we had contacts with their foreign minister. President Putin talked to them. They exchanged the statements, and President Putin congratulated them with being elected as the prime minister. He got a reply. Then recently they had a conversation by phone, from what I can tell from the Japanese side. So we still need to look at their practical policies regarding a lot of things. But despite a lot of forecasts, I think that our Japanese neighbors, they want to continue the policies that they had regarding all sectors. And it reflects the approach that Russia has regarding the mutual agreements with the predecessor of the current government. And it states that only large-scale partnership in economy, technology, and humanitarian sector, and of course in the sector of coordinating our foreign political approaches, it could bring our relations to a new level, which we definitely need, so that we could start talking about any matters that are still on the agenda. So, talking about the confrontation with the US, it's all clear. So, large countries such as China, it's also clear. But there are some countries that are dependent on us: Abkhazia, Tajikistan, Belarus. I'm sorry, we have talked about our drama in Belarus. We are even prohibited to sell our books. Belarus. So, as for Abkhazia, we sent away all the old women from the apartments, so Russian old women, and they were chased away from their apartments. And Tajikistan, we can launch, Russia today can launch their bureau in there. Komsomolskaya Pravda and as well. The country is absolutely dependent on that. Hundreds of thousands of Russians still live there, and they behave any manner they want. So I've got 2 suggestions. Maybe we could put it into the agreement with them, so about our media presence there. Because, well, it's just hurtful when Abkhazia, Tajikistan, they are just throwing away Russian people. I'm talking about Russian-speaking people interested. They do whatever they want with them, and we can't do anything. Well, I agree that the examples that you've listed, that you could continue this list, in particular the problem with our media. So it's not really well regulated neither in Armenia nor in Kazakhstan, where they are introducing new broadcast rules. So and the relations, our alliances, didn't disappear. The communications ministry had to start the negotiations, and I'm sure we will resolve this matter. So you think it's just a technical issue? No, just these two cases that I've mentioned, Kazakhstan and Armenia. I agree that these matters, we shouldn't have even faced these issues, keeping in mind what relations we have, keeping in mind all we do in practice on the ground, keeping in mind that we are in a lot of treaties together, together. So I guess our interests, it should have been automatically taken into consideration. So maybe not automatically, we have to use some more cautious term, but still, it's all on our agenda. And as for ethnical Russians and ethnical Georgians, who are citizens of the Russian Federation in Abkhazia. So it is a matter of our constant attention, and I hope that now, after this situation in Abkhazia calms down, we will come back to this matter, even though I say that we are quite surprised that this matter has not been resolved yet. So we will continue to will be more active in promoting our interests in these relations, our interests in relations with the countries that you've mentioned. Most of them, our presence there, I mean, business-wise, so it is really vast majority of our enterprises there with the Russian capital and some joint ventures, joint enterprises. Most of the countries, we have to admit that teaching the Russian language at a good level in Tajikistan, according to the agreement that we have with Dushanbe. We are launching the special programs to train the teachers of Russian language. We are opening additional schools and to support the state policy to preserve the Russian language as the key language of the multinational communication inside the country. The same is happening in other CIS countries such as Kyrgyzstan. And I think that, well, I guess it's really hard for me to judge, because every time when I look into some practical matter of the relations that we have with our allies, with our strategic partners, I guess you have a chance to be more objective. You see a bigger picture in this regard. So for us, it's important to hear that from you as well. And when your media and your other colleagues have some practical issues, then of course, we will always be ready to not just to hear you out, but we will take them into consideration, and we will also try to do something on practical level.
Lavrov, I have another question. We always say, in a country, some country, they redacted our common history. In a different country, they demolished a monument to a general, or our general, which fought in World War II. In a different country, yet different country, they demolished a mural. And we say that we shouldn't be letting them do that. Well, what should we do in order to prevent that from happening again? Well, it's just as Ms. Simonian said. Should we really abide by international law or just discard it? I say let's go beyond it. Okay, then let me give you this picture. Yeah, please do. Okay, I'll do that. We take all the monuments which were set up to honor the memory of legionnaires in the Baltic states. They are here based on the international law document. So if we go beyond international law, then we can bring it all down. But that will be an open invitation to them to do the same to our monuments in Poland, maybe in Bulgaria. That will become a new normal for them. And this way, they will bring down the last thing which is still in place. The one obstacle which is still on the way of these nationalists in these countries. Look, we were in Minsk. We had an interview with Mr. Lukashenko. We had a trip there. We passed the Hating sign on the road. And we have a memorial. And this memorial is in good state. It's Katin. It's Katin. Oh, yes, sorry. I was wrong. It's Katin. So, at the state level, we are keeping it cared. And they know Russia will never do anything to this monument. That's one example. It's the recent example. And they are not following suit. They are just bringing one monument after another down. Maybe we can do something about that. Can we just frighten them into not doing that? When it comes to protecting these monuments, standing up for our memory and the historical truth about the events of the past, there is no other way but to insist that international obligations should be upheld in full. Yes, they do demolish these monuments in Poland, in other countries as well. And the arguments that they use to justify that, they are not decent. At least I think they're not decent at all. They say we are demolishing monuments only where there is no burial place. But the obligations say all monuments should be preserved. And they also brought down some of the monuments which were at up the burial places in Tallinn, for instance. That's just one example, and there are many of them. If we respond in kind, that will be just going against all the Christian principles. You say we can't do that like that because this is international law and we should stand by it. Let's act in our own interest. You say we will not act like they do because we are Christians. That's not our tradition. No, you're wrong. It's international law and we play by its rules. I said Christianity. We're Christians. We're Orthodox. And for us, it is sacrilege to topple a monument, to desecrate a grave. We never do that. And there is international law. Even if there is no international law, all the monuments which are still there in Poland and other countries, I think that process, it is inevitable. And they would say, okay, Russia withdrew and we will withdraw too. I don't want to draw any comparisons here. It may sound like it's sacrilege again, but still, it's like poker. The first one to blink loses. If we blink the first, we say our patience is running out thing. We decided not to play by international law. If we do that, why would we do that? To demolish these monuments on our own territory? We don't do that. We can also discuss other areas where this one is a good variant. No. We are talking about history. we see basically attacks on our history. All the things which we have achieved with other countries, sacrificing the lives of our people in order to put an end to Hitler's coalition, all these attempts are now being undermined. We are now initiating a process in the United Nations, and every year we put forward a resolution in order to prevent glorification of Nazism. Ukraine and USA, they vote against that, and the EU, they abstain from voting. I think it's basically irresponsible. I cannot imagine why would they do that. There is now a new term. And this resolution, which I am referring to now, it's just about the 75th anniversary of the World War II ending. And there is one suggestion. All EU members, all UN members should say that the victory in World War II is the common heritage of the people of the world. The UN is our common heritage. It was made possible thanks to winning in World War II. And there are countries who are against that. Canada, Georgia, Ukraine, America, and the EU. All of them. And they provide no explanation. This is unacceptable, and this shows that they really want to rewrite a history, not only to whitewash their predecessors, but also to use this new history, History 2.0, to support their anti-Russian policies. So there is every ground to believe this is indeed the case, and we will fight that. Yet, I do not agree that it serves our interests to disregard international law. We should leave it all behind. No, we shouldn't do that. Mr. Lavrov, you avoided answering the question about the bright future with the US. Let me take a different angle. No, I didn't try to dodge that question. I just said it's not going to be better. All right. Is there a chance for us, Russia and the US, to come close? Maybe. There is also a different way. We know that there is an anti-China coalition being formed by America, and maybe we can play to our advantage. We can say, okay, we can stand with US here, and maybe this way can improve our relations, build a new alliance. We always do what we can, and our actions are based on real facts, and there are no facts, no reasons to think that we should distance from anyone, that we should take a step back from the obligations which looks to us as good, as mutually beneficial. And I don't think we should be playing against China only to show that we are also aces in this game of intrigues. No, that would be detrimental to us. The Americans, I think, they are way beyond diplomacy. They are saying it openly that Russia should help us to punish China, to force China into disarmament, to freeze their weapons development. The Americans, they're speculating. They're like crook card players. They said that we can put on ice all our nuclear arsenal development, and that was done prior to the election. They did it because of the election. They said Russia also wants China to do that. That is just an underhanded means of pursuing their own goals. Okay, this new start talks. They say that we can freeze our arsenal development. They say that we can continue talks on these terms. Could you elaborate on that? Listen, there have been certain agreements in place. Agreements such as this should be based on the interest which each of the party has. We should analyze threats, we should present our interests. And under threats, I mean the threat from a counterpart. But it all should end in a compromise which would be something, some common ground between the two sides, which would serve the interests and which would alleviate the concerns at the same time. We have means of carrying nuclear warheads onto the territory of an opponent. That was part of the treaty. Now, the US wants to leave these nuclear warhead carriers in place because they have lots of such means of carrying nuclear warheads. They're not part of the talks. They are saying that Russia has something new in the game. And these new things, which new weapons are being entering into service. We have 5 new weapon systems. 2 of them, we are ready to include 2 of them in the text of a New START treaty. And they know that. Americans know about that. We made it clear. Which of them, which weapon systems are we ready to include? I won't give you any details, okay? It's all live. Those who are covered by the existing treaty. This is an intercontinental ballistic missile, a submarine-launched missile, and a strategic bomber. And the US said they do not form part of the agreement. They are not covered. That's what they do. They have a rapid attack program. It's a non-nuclear option. It's a set of strategic capabilities which can attack targets. And they say it will take them 1 hour to reach any point on the globe. This is something which is not covered by our talks yet. They don't include that into the demilitarization of space talks, even though space, just as cyberspace, is now part of possible warfare for America. Officially, the United States said that it's not going to join the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Americans say we won't be discussing carriers for nuclear weapons. They say, let's count warheads. And that's it. That means that America wants to introduce a new subject to the conversation, tactical nuclear weapons, non-strategic nuclear weapons. And we've always been saying this very clearly to them. And then they understood that prior to including these category of weapons into any restrictions discussions, please put this tactical warheads away from any territory which is not the territory of your country. And we have such tactical weapons in 5 NATO countries. In addition to that, in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, America is now inviting and involving NATO countries in training with how to use these weapons, which is a blatant violation of the treaty. Instead of leveling the game, creating a platform for talks by withdrawing these weapons to the US territory, they say, let's say that it's going to stay. Let's just count all these things. That's one thing. And the second term that the US set forth is to go back to the verification mechanisms which were in place in the 90s. And those mechanisms, they were humiliation for us. Their inspectors, they were just sitting at the doorstep to our factories. They would measure the containers for missiles. They would analyze it all. Yes, we had the same right. We had the right to be there at US factories. However, when coordinating the treaty which is now in place, and I mean New START, it was decided that we will not do such intrusive verification inspections because it's something which does not answer the spirit of partnership. And in the situation of the 21st century, there is no way we should be that disrespectful towards each other because it was a equal-based treaty. Now, America wants to count all the warheads, as I said, bring back to the strict verification mechanisms, and they want to force us into trying to convince China to join the talks. But that's nothing new. The US always wanted that. I worked here for years, and I do remember that when we talked about the Strategic Weapons Reduction Treaty, they said that the nuclear weapons carriers should become high-precision carriers, high-precision weapon carriers. And they said, well, we reduce the number of such carriers. So there's nothing new. If they, again, are on the same track, there is no way we can sign a treaty. I think so. There is no way we can sign a treaty. They are so stubbornly trying to impose this on us. We're not shutting the door. We're not severing context. Every time we just explain it again and again that we cannot hold talks when you are putting forward ultimatums, ignoring all the principles which have been perfected and universally approved for decades as the very foundation for all our agreements and treaties such as START. One. By the way, one of them, it was just a political declaration. Back in the day, it was not a binding one. Yet it helped us to put in place the very strategic process in place. And you asked us about the US, our relations with the US. He said we can probably play to our advantage the existing disagreement between America and China. Yeah, maybe we can choose between Biden and Trump. Is someone of them is better for us or not? Do you have an opinion? Okay. I just can tell you this. Mr. Slepakov, he was very, very on point, but he said America, they just don't like it. Let's not just end it here. Just want to tell you a story. Mr. Lavrov, Foreign Minister Lavrov, went on air with 3 major radio stations here in Russia, quotes Semyon Slipakov. It's incredible. I never thought that would happen. Okay, let's just stop talking about New START. It's quite pessimistic and there's no hope here. But let me ask you about something else. There is an opinion. I don't know whether I agree with this opinion, and I don't know whether you would agree, but some saying that in Kazakhstan there will be something similar to what happened in Ukraine. I mean, there will be a huge disagreement between the ethnic Russians and the people of Kazakhstan, I mean the Kazakhstanis. I read this in a couple of sources. Several people are saying that. I hope this is not going to happen. I haven't been to Kazakhstan for long. I never seen any reasons to believe that will be the case, but maybe you know more than I do. Do you see any tensions in Kazakhstan's territory? And also another question. Will we ever do anything to help our, ethnic Russian, fellow Russians to come back to home? Because many of them are living outside and maybe we can help them to come back.
As for Kazakhstan, I don't really see the threat that the Kazakhstan will be divided ethnically. I think Kazakhstan authorities understand perfectly that the ethnical relations must be strengthened and consolidated to support the territorial integrity of their own country. And keeping in mind the interests of the Russian-speaking population of Kazakhstan, I think it's one of the primary things of primary importance to support the Russian-speaking environment in Kazakhstan, to give Russian-speaking parents the right to send their kids to Russian-speaking schools. It's all part of the agreements within the CIS treaties and bilateral documents between Russia and Kazakhstan. And of course, it does concern the matter about Russians being involved in governing the regions in Kazakhstan and governing the state itself. And I'm convinced, I'm sure that the president of Kazakhstan and first president of Kazakhstan understands it perfectly, at least in the context that we had at the level of the heads of state, at the level of all kinds of ministers. We can always see this understanding as for those who is in contact with Kazakhstan apart from us about their ideas being pure. I don't really believe that they have some pure goals in there. And we are talking about Americans now, not about Chinese. As the way Americans behave themselves in the post-Soviet states, in particular in Central Asia, we can see that they are trying to solve contradictions in the hope that it will be another country that is not just geographically neighboring to the country, but that is politically, in the military sense, it's a very close territory to us. It's our ally. And of course, they make such attempts, at least all the NGOs that are being funded by the American funds, American foundations, they promote these ideas that encourages nationalistic views inside the country to keep this fire burning. But China, first of all, is interested in promoting their economic interest, and they have already commented on the matters, on the questions that we had in regard of the current Czech Tsarov article, and China, after accumulating economic prowess, and they did it following the rules that were introduced by the West, by the Americans, first of all, in the context of the globalization context, because now that's the consequence of this ordeal, because Americans, they don't like that China raised so high, went so high, playing by the rules that were written by the Americans themselves. So now Americans want to leave the World Trade Organization and to withdraw from all the other treaties that champion unity and liberties and freedom. So China, by demonstrating their economic prowess, it's implementing, fulfilling their interests, and we are trying to be a part of it, and we are trying to harmonize the interests of the Central Asia, of the other post-Soviet states, including the interests of Russia, with the interests and opportunities that are given by the China and Eurasian Economic Union had already signed 2 agreements with China to harmonize Eurasian integration with the Chinese project One Road, One Belt, and a wider context within a philosophy that Mr. Putin has called the establishment of the United Eurasian area. And we invite all the countries, including ASEAN countries, to join this project, and including those countries that are not part of any treaties of any integration unions. And we keep the doors open for the European Union as well, because not using these opportunities that were given to us by God, I mean, our geography of this promising and actively developing continent, it would be just silly if we talk about the interest of all the countries. But I would like to emphasize one more time that with Kazakhstan or with any other CIS state, we have a very productive dialogue regarding all the matters, trusting dialogue, and all concerns that we have. We express them openly in a friendly manner, and we are resolving these matters in the vast amount of cases. So hopefully all those kind of matters. So we have one brief question and we have enough time for one brief answer. I wanted to ask the question from our audience because they really wanted to ask. It's an easy question, actually. Ask our foreign minister because he traveled the entire world, 5 most beautiful spots. Well, it's beautiful everywhere in its own way, and its own right, but I'm more inclined to stick to the views, to the ideals that I have, that traveling the world, you have to remember that it's impossible to travel across our country. And there are enough beautiful spots in our country for many generations to go. And we have this dispute because I am a fan of Altai and he's a fan of the forest. And we are fans of the Krasnodar region, right? Sochi, Black Sea coast, that's where we went to travel the holidays together. Well, talking about active holidays, so that wasn't very active. Well, it depends on what you do. I know what people do there. So, but anyhow, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this great conversation. I know that Italians are waiting for you. Thank you for explaining us a lot of things that we have been talking about. Thank you for this chance to talk to you.